Hey guys, welcome to Module 5 already. So this week, the focus of your readings is going to be on promoting a positive work-life and balance. And that's going to be the focus of your journal for this week. Also this week, we have a major assignment, which is project number 1. Okay, so what I want to do first is just quickly go over project or the assignment here in Module 5, 5-2, which is Project 1. I want to go over it real quick just to outline some of the key things you need to keep in mind as you prepare this assignment. And so make sure that you give this assignment the time it needs and deserves, because it's a pretty heavy weighted assignment in terms of points, okay? So one of the first things you need to remember is that project number 1, 5-2, project 1, is going to be tied back to the paper you wrote in module 2. And basically what you're going to do here is analyze societal trends that are affecting the criminal justice system. Now, back in module 2, you already selected your trend, and that trend will be the same one that you apply here, because some of the responses required for this assignment are directly related to that previous assignment in module 2. So remember, the 4 choices you had in terms of societal trends were how police build rapport and improve community relations, how the use of technology is increasing in criminal justice, how bail reform impacts the criminal justice system and the community, and how the criminal justice system has adopted to the drug addiction paradigm shift from an individual's choice to the disease model. All right, so again, key here is you're going to be using that same trend that you researched and wrote about in module 2. Okay, so that's one of the important parts. You're going to identify the impact that this trend has on law enforcement, courts, correctional institutions, or probation/parole. The key term here is research. So this is a 3 to 4 page paper, so make sure you support parts of your paper with evidence of research. That'll be very important, so make sure you do that, okay? So here are the assignment directions. And so make sure you read through these carefully. There are 4 critical elements that you need to specifically address for this assignment. And so make sure you review them carefully, understand what's needed, and then address them fully and completely, all right? Make sure as you're writing this assignment that you clearly distinguish when you're moving from one critical element to the next, so that I know that you're moving on to discuss the next critical element. So make sure your introductory paragraph or your introductory sentence clearly lets me know that you're moving from one critical element to the next, okay? So again, make sure you're familiar with the directions and the specific critical elements that we're dealing with for this assignment. Your submission should be 3 to 4 pages in a Word document format. So please do not submit it in any other format other than Word, all right? Any sources used should be cited according to APA style, so make sure you do that, just as we have been doing. All right, so again, you need to do some research with this, so make sure that you can support that your ideas with evidence of research, because that's going to be important here. So again, support your ideas with evidence of research. And other than that, I think it's pretty straightforward. So again, you're going to be choosing the same trend, social trend that you researched in module 2. Be 3 to 4 pages in length, and then make sure you address these critical elements. Carefully review the grading rubric so you know what the requirements are for each of these critical elements and what's required to get an exemplary rating, a proficient rating, and so forth. All right. If you have any questions during the week about this assignment, please don't hesitate to give me a call or text or email or whatever it is that you think is appropriate. All right. So that's the major writing assignment for this week. So what I'm going to do now is I want to switch to a new screen, and then we're going to talk about the stress and what organizations can do to mitigate stress, especially among employees. And I'm going to be looking at this from a law enforcement perspective. All right. Okay, so the journal assignment this week has you looking at managing and reducing stress, and you're given a couple of scenarios to consider, and then if my memory serves me correctly, you're going to select one of those, and then you're going to answer the critical elements associated with the assignment. Okay, so basically we're going to be looking at managing and reducing stress. So how can organizations reduce the level of stress? And organizations have a certain responsibility in terms of trying to mitigate and reduce stress associated with the job of their employees and the tasks and duties and responsibilities that take place within that particular organization. Okay, so I'm going to just be talking briefly from a law enforcement perspective, and I'm not obviously going to be talking about all of the possible factors, but I want to give you some ideas to what we're looking for here, all right? So in terms of how organizations can reduce stress, one of the first things you can do is your selection process and procedures. In other words, who it is that you hire. So what I mean by that is it's very important for an organization to make sure that your employees go through some type of psychological evaluation. Now, these can be rather expensive, and sometimes organizations might not want to go through that process just because of the cost associated with it. But I think it's a critical element here in terms of making sure that you can hire an employee that has the emotional intelligence for this type of job. And having that emotional intelligence might help the organization later on in terms of stress reduction and how the employee will be able to manage and handle stress. Another factor is training. Now that training can be part of the field training program or an officer who's an academy. He's integrated into the organization, and at that point he can learn about the organizational resources available to help you mitigate and reduce stress that occurs on the job. Also, there's training that can take place in terms of the training that's offered to help prevent stress, recognize signs of stress, learning skills for active coping and relaxation, that type of a training. So the organization can offer those things. I mentioned career development here only because I think it's important to understand that in terms of law enforcement, not everybody's going to get promoted. There's always going to be a percentage of the organization that is going to have a career as a police officer. So the organization might want to develop ways other than promoting someone to add more responsibility to a particular job within the organization. So a lot of organizations, depending on the size of the police department, you might have an opportunity for an employee to work, for example, in a traffic division, or maybe be a canine handler, or work in narcotics, or work in gang unit or something like that, where the employee has an opportunity to develop his career further for 3, 4, 5 years, however the organization sets it up. And it gives that employee a little bit more responsibility. So the idea being that hopefully that'll mitigate the stress level from not being able to be promoted for one reason or another. I mentioned couples therapy only because a lot of what goes on in the police department, an employee can take that stress home, which can present some problems, or there might be stress at home, which can impact the employee's ability to do his job effectively while they're working. So, organizations need to understand that this is a key component here in terms of organizational stress. The married life, the home life, whatever is going on, they might want to consider some type of employee assistance program related to couples therapy. The other thing I have written down here is ongoing psychological support, employee assistance programs, which many organizations do have, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then some organizations have developed fitness standards. In other words, teaching their employees proper exercise, diet, The FBI is really big on fitness standards. That's a practice that they teach from the academy till you retire. So fitness standards and obviously eating right, staying fit can mitigate and reduce the stress of an employee. Okay, next I want to briefly talk about how management can reduce the reluctance of employees to seek assistance for stress. In other words, how do we encourage our employees to go get help? Because especially with law enforcement, that sometimes can be a challenge. Um, so I think up front what you need to do is establish clear policies to show the organization's commitment to employee wellness. And then those policies often will identify and outline for an employee how he can access those resources, right? Peer support can be another one where members of the organization, in other words, your peer, another police officer, who may be experiencing the same things you're experiencing or has been and has dealt with counseling, can offer you some support and guidance in terms of trying to get you going in the right direction where you might want to seek additional resources. The other thing is provide the resources and make resources easily available to employees. You can't make resources so difficult that the employee just gives up. One of the things that we had in my organization in terms of this employee wellness program was that the employees can go see a counselor. And as chief of police, I didn't know who went. I got a bill every month and also told me that 4 employees went, and basically the general area of the counseling, whether it was family, work-related, something along those lines, but it's clearly anonymous, right? And so maybe that might be something for an organization to consider because it gives that employee a sense of privacy, and then they won't be so concerned about any stigma. And that's my last one, is the organization should try to develop strategies to reduce the stigma so that those employees who do in fact go seek some level of counseling aren't stigmatized as being unfit or something along those lines, because they're really not. What we're trying to do is mitigate stress before it becomes a real problem within the organization and for the employee. Programs to prevent or reduce stress. Again, we already talked about peer support. Critical incident stress debriefings. In my organization, critical incident stress debriefings were mandatory. Now, that didn't mean that you had to, at that time, spend hours with a counselor. But a counselor did come out, briefly talk to the employees. If an employee wanted to receive additional counseling, arrangements were made. But we always had follow-up. In other words, in a handful of days, the employee would have to go to the counseling center and talk to the counselor just to review and mitigate things. Chaplain Corps, you'd be surprised the benefits of having chaplains. Other stress management programs, health programs, stress and management seminars can also be useful. Resources and habits to reduce stress, access to professional counseling and services, learning how to eat and drink to optimize one's health, exercise regularly, meditation, yoga, something along those lines, and trying to establish a regular sleep schedule. That can be really problematic in law enforcement, but even if you're working an odd shift, developing a regular sleep pattern and sleep schedule, I think can be extremely beneficial in terms of, personal habits that try to reduce stress. Critical role of manager and supervisors is the last one here. I think any organization needs to recognize the critical role of your managers and supervisors in minimizing the effects of stress on their subordinates. Supervisors and managers may actually be the first ones to recognize the signs of stress. If you've been working with an individual, supervising an individual for some time, as a field sergeant, for example, you may quickly begin to recognize when your employee begins to start slipping in some ways, whether it's his personal appearance, whether it's his tardiness, whatever that is. The first line supervisor is often going to be that one person that might be able to pick something out. And so it's important that our managers and supervisors are adequately trained in recognizing stress, but also take effective action as soon as stress is recognized. Okay, that's it. I hope this helps. Have a great week, everybody. Bye.